the gamma state. So I'm saying this to you now because we're about to move into the gamma state. And I want you to know all of the benefits that come from doing precisely this. So we've explored many of the potentials that come from awakening this marriage, this union between the heart and the brain. And there are others. We're just barely scratching the surface. But what I'd like to do now is share with you a technique so that you can tap these potentials in your life when you choose to do so. What scientists know is that every moment of every day, as I mentioned, there's this conversation. It's a conversation between the heart and the brain. The heart is speaking to the brain, and the quality of the conversation that comes from the heart and the brain tells the brain what chemistry to release into the body. So for example, when we're feeling emotions that we would typically consider negative, and I don't like to characterize emotions as negative or positive, but I'm doing this so you get a sense for what we're doing here. When we have emotions such as anger, hate, jealousy, rage, what you're seeing on your screen is an actual printout of the quality of the signal from the heart to the brain. And you can see it's very chaotic, it's a very jagged signal, it's a rough signal, and it's that chaotic, jagged, rough signal that signals chaotic chemistry in your brain. This is the kind of chemistry that tells us that we need high amounts of adrenaline, high amounts of cortisol, the stress hormones, to respond to something quickly in life. That's a good thing for a few moments. You don't want to live your life day in and day out like this. The next image that you're seeing is what happens when we can shift our heart-based experiences from things like frustration, anger, hate, jealousy, and rage to things like compassion, care for anything, gratitude for anything, appreciation for anything. And when we can do that, very, very quickly, this signal from the heart to the brain shifts, and you're seeing that becomes a very rhythmic, very even, very coherent signal. This is what it's called. And it sends a different signal to our brain, and our brain begins to release a different chemistry into our bodies. Now, I'm saying this to you now because I want you to know that your brain cannot do both things at the same time. It can only do one or the other. So when you are in coherent feeling and that even rhythm, that's what awakens your brain to send powerful healing chemistry, powerful immune response, powerful anti-aging hormones, awakens your senses, turns on the gamma. Okay, and when you are in the rough, jagged signal, that's fight or flight, your body and your brain are saying, something important is happening, we've got to run or fight, so we don't have time for healing, we don't have time for an immune response, we don't have time for anti-aging hormones, they're not important. So it shuts off those functions in preferential treatment of this fight or flight. So for this reason, you can see why fight or flight's good momentarily, don't want long term. We can shift these brain states very, very quickly. And what I'd like to do now is I'm going to share a technique with you to help to do this. We can measure this conversation between the heart and the brain electrically, and it is a very low frequency. So this isn't an esoteric essence of a prana or aura. This is an electrical and a magnetic frequency, and the electrical part is a very, very low frequency. It is 0.1 hertz. It's not even 1, 0.1 hertz. This is such a low frequency, you can't even hear this. It is right on the threshold between feeling and hearing. It's a frequency that whales use to communicate in the oceans. So it's a very universal frequency. It's also a frequency that military submarines use to communicate in the oceans, which is why it's a problem for the whales when they use it. And it is the optimal signal to harmonize your heart and your brain. So what this means is if you can create a feeling in your heart of 0.1 hertz, then that feeling is going to harmonize your heart and your brain. Now, in indigenous traditions that I've been with, they have techniques to do this. The Institute of Heart Math that I mentioned in the last episode, they have refined these techniques in the laboratory into very, very simple steps that make them accessible in our everyday environment, whether we're in an urban environment, whether we're in a military environment, a first responder environment. This technique is being used in all these environments that I'm mentioning now, in family and marriage and family counseling environments, in cardiac environments to help deal with blood pressure and cardiac events that are happening within our bodies. So there are a vast and myriad number of applications for the one technique that we're going to do right now, and this technique is the doorway for all the potentials that we've just listed. By achieving heart-brain coherence, it opens the door and we get to choose. It's like once we're in this place, now we can do this, 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 or this. We can do subconscious, we can go into intuition, we can simply use this technique before we go to bed at night to begin to sleep and trigger a healing within our bodies. We can do it first thing in the morning. We can do it before our yoga. We can do it before our martial arts. We can do it before our qigong, our healing practice, any of these things, because everything goes better with heart-brain coherence. And that's all we're doing, is we're optimizing the conversation between the heart and the brain, between your heart and your brain. So how do we do this? 3 steps. The first step is to simply shift your awareness from your mind into your heart. And what I've found is in the Western traditions, for many people, that's easier said than done. I'll ask people, are you in your heart? And they'll say, yep, I'm in my heart. But what they are really doing is they're still in their brain thinking about what it would be like if they're in their heart. This is where the indigenous traditions come in. Our ancestors told us, and when I spend time with my indigenous friends, I say, how do you guys do this? And they say it helps if you can gently touch your heart center, physically, in a way that's comfortable for you. In the Mayan traditions, you see an open palm right on the heart. In many of the Middle Eastern traditions, you see the same thing. In the Buddhist traditions, you see a prayer mudra that physically touches the sternum. The key is, any of those things creates a gentle touch, a physical sensation right over the heart center. And your awareness will always go to the place where you feel the sensation. That's the key. So if you can create a touch over your heart, your awareness will go there. First step. Second step, very simple. Slow your breathing a little bit slower than typical. Maybe 5 seconds inhale, 5 seconds exhale. And here's why that's powerful. Because the only time you would ever slow your breathing and breathe in that way is when you feel safe. When you feel that you're in a place that's safe and you're not threatened and you're not vigilant of your surroundings. So you're telling your body you're in a place that's safe. Slow your breathing. Third step, and this is the key, is to begin to feel the feeling that creates 0.1 hertz. Feel the feeling that sets up the coherence between your heart and your brain. How do we do that? I gave it away earlier, we've already mentioned it. Scientists have found, at the Institute of Heart Math, their researchers have found that there are 4 key words that work almost 100% of the time for everyone. Appreciation for anything or anyone. Gratitude for anything or anyone. Care and compassion. If you can feel one or some combination of those feelings in your heart while you're breathing as if your breath is coming from your heart, touching your heart center, now you're setting up this communication between the heart and the brain. Now you are triggering those neurons to begin to reach out and find other neurons to strengthen this connection. And that's why I mentioned before, it takes about 72 hours, 3 days to build these networks. So that means the more you do what we're about to do right now, the stronger this connection becomes in your life. Let's try this. Let's go through this together. And this is the way we're going to close out our segment today. I'm going to invite you first to shift your awareness from your mind into your heart by gently touching your heart center. Okay? And once you're there, breathe a little slower than you typically would. Maybe 5 seconds inhale, 5 seconds exhale. And as you breathe, feel your breath coming from your heart and begin to feel those feelings. Compassion, gratitude, care, appreciation. To the best of your ability, to the best of your ability. And I'm going to do the same. Okay. And what researchers have found is that typically 3 minutes, only 3 minutes of doing what we have just done will set into motion a cascade of events within your body, biochemical events that will last as long as 6 hours. The immune response, the SIGA response, first-line immune in the white blood cells of your mouth, they are reflecting this effect for up to 6 hours after you actually create the experience. So I mentioned that we can do this any time of day. You can do it before you sleep at night, first thing when you wake up in the morning. This technique, as simple as it seems, is the powerful key to awaken the greatest potential in your life. The simple technique that we have just experienced, it is the key to our personal power and to the doorway of all the abilities considered rare and mystical in the past. We don't have to go to a monastery halfway around the world to learn them. In our next episode, we're going to discover how this very technique is also the key to trigger the self-healing within your body that leads to an extended lifespan well beyond what's traditionally accepted today. So I want to thank you for joining me for this very powerful episode, and be sure to tune in for our next all-new episode of Missing Links, the deep truth of our origin, history, destiny, and fate.